think we've got four very. You jumped on. You go back one. I think we've got four really nice presentations. Just remind people, please use the chat if you can for questions or to highlight stuff. If you are just listening and not contributing at the time, please stay on mute. That'd be really helpful. And it is recorded, so you can watch it back later, and I'll try and make sure I'm not too Janerish and very festive. So next slide, please. So just a reminder, some of our people first practices, we really want to see and share ideas, hopefully that have shown how staff have got involved in improvement and their voices heard, how we're improving value for patients, and where teams have driven improvement. So next slide, please. Just a reminder of the 5 elements that sometimes sit in our work, which I'd be nice to see if we can spot them today. Really clear purpose, where people use plan, do, study, act, and learn from the steps they're taking. Do they have daily metrics involved that they're really conscious of? How have they used their huddles, and are they doing anything with team health? So there's a kind of 5 pillars to some of the things we do with frontline teams. Next slide, please. So I think we've just changed the order because Becky, I think you've got to be somewhere else quite soon. So I think you're going to give us a nice report and then fly away. But you're going to talk about a 2-hour review. Ollie is actually recorded, but a brilliant interactive recording with her coach, Charlotte. And we've got Sarah predicting stroke recovery, which is fantastic, and Chris talking about your D&I training. So with no further delay, I hope Becky's in the audience and ready to go.
I'm here, thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Hi everyone, I'm Becky Greenwood. I'm service line manager for acute medicine, or I was until last week, so that's what we'll keep it at the moment because I haven't quite got my title right. I'm going to talk to you about our medical assessment unit routines that we've been putting in place. So we can go on to the next slide and I'll give it a little background. So back in the summer, we opened up the medical receiving unit as an additional medical assessment unit or medical assessment area for patients. And one thing that we really learned from opening that up was really good communication across the varied teams that we have in acute medicine that come and visit. So we have specialities come, OT physios, all sorts of MDT members, our colleagues from Live Welcome. And one of the things we put in place right at the beginning of opening MRU was to have a 2-hourly catch-up about every patient on the ward that we had. It's a high turnover ward, so hence the every 2 hours because things change quite quickly. So what is the plan for this patient? What is their EDD? Can this patient be not require bedded care, and can we organise something different? What scans do they need? What bloods do they need? What are the plans for those patients? So building on the work that we did on MRU and seeing the success of that, we then moved to our AMUs, which are Tavy and Threshold. We did a little bit of work just seeing where we were initially, so some kind of baseline work on that. And it was really clear we had the same fast turnover. In fact, it was getting faster because of the processes that we put in for as part of the one plan. It was really clear that there was lack of communication across all the teams, and often the nurse in charge hadn't managed to get hold of exactly what was going on with that patient. So we put in our 2-hourly catch-ups also on Tavy and Threshold. It was really clear from the work that we did right at the beginning that the Bay nurse, and that's the nurse that is actually physically looking after the patient, not necessarily the nurse in charge, 50% of the time weren't really clear what the plan was for that patient and what they needed to do in the next few hours to get that patient moved on or discharged, or through their stay and through their care needs. So that was a bit of work that we did prior to putting in the 2-hourly huddles. And we can go to the next slide. So what we did was we kind of mirrored what we'd done on MRU in some ways, and we had a board outside every bay. So we knew what date the patient arrived on MAU, how many days they'd been on MAU, who particularly they were under, because on AMU we could have patients that are under neurology, under cardiology, and also needing to go to HCE bed or various bits of that. So that is very clear visual outside the bay that everybody can see. So the nurse in the bay is kind of leads on that discussion. We have a ward clerk come along to that. We have CCRT come along so that they can advise and support with patients that we could potentially discharge instead of putting in, getting into hospital beds. It's very clear who, if patients need TTAs, who's going to do it and when we're expecting that done by. And any other jobs like this patient needs some extra bloods, needs a chest x-ray, and it's just a really good visual look. So I can walk on those wards, not necessarily know every single patient, but I can actually walk on that ward, look at those charts and see what the plan for those patients is and what might need to be escalated because it's not happened. But just to see what needs to be done to make sure that that patient can move to their next destination, whether that be home or to another ward. We also, as well as the catch-ups that we have done, we've also done some work around our, which isn't on here, our 11 o'clock huddle that we have. So that's our MDT meeting, if you like, to make that more standardized so it doesn't matter which consultant is running that 11 o'clock huddle. Everybody does it the same sorts of ways. That's some ongoing work that Aileen has taken on. And really making really good plans at that 11 o'clock, making sure obviously we're looking at our sickest patients, then looking at patients that could potentially be discharged, and then making a plan of who's going to follow that discharge process up. And then again, we have the same at 3 o'clock, which we've actually brought forward to 2 o'clock. Because some of the workforce model that we have actually makes it more efficient to be at 2 o'clock. And that is around queries, jobs, TTAs, and making sure that we're covering our sickest patients so that we know that those patients have been seen. We on TAVI, some of you might know, so we moved the majority of the TAVI staff to Tamar MRU when we opened it. So the TAVI staff are a new workforce. Some of them have worked in acute medicine previously, some of them hadn't. So actually for them to actually take part in this and feel like they've taken ownership on, a project that actually has benefit to patients and the staff has been really, really good. And just as a kind of a tagline on that. So after we put in the 2 hourly catch-ups, there is 90%. So instead of the 50% clarity on what's going on with their patients, that has increased to 90% afterwards. And next slide. Oh no, that is it. I have done it very, very quickly. Are there any questions at all? Sorry, I've done it really, really quick.
I know you haven't. You've done it brilliantly.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Becky. If there's any questions, could you put some in the chat? I guess I've got one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, uh, how do you sustain? Because they all practice. If you're not careful, sometimes it's great for a period and then it gradually not used properly, then erodes. How are you working across MRU and MAU to make sure that it maintains its impact?
So we have worked with our matron and our sisters to make sure that they're, taking part in these, keeping, watching to see what's happening, and supporting as well. So I went round on one and I was able to suggest perhaps this patient would be better for virtual ward. Just kind of being there every now and then and just making sure that it's happening. I have to say, yeah, I'm not going to talk about many negatives. On MRU, it was so easy to implement because it was a new ward, it was a new start. We did it right from the beginning, and it was harder to get some of the staff involved. On Tavy and Threshold, but we have gradually got there and made sure that the doctors are involved as well. But I think it's just having that oversight every now and then of is it happening? Is it still working in the same way that it was? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Becky. I don't think I've seen any other questions, so I'm going to say really, really well done. It feels like a really important part of your MAU and MRU process now. So and I'm glad it's having the effect for patients. So really well done, and thank you for continuing all the fidelity work to keep it in place. It's really great.
Yep. All right. I'm really
Thank
sorry. I'm
you.
going to have to dash off. Thank you.
Thank you for sparing the time. Okay, so next up is if there are any other questions, I'll try and get them answered. Next up is unusually because we've really tried to get Ollie to the presentation, but it wasn't possible with both Ollie's and his coach's time. But what we've got is a really short recording of Charlotte, who's his coach, talking through the kata that he's done. It only takes, I think, 3 or 4 minutes, so it's well worth a listen if you want to understand the improvement, but also the kata approach. So I think the wheels of the organisation are now going to play that. Uh, oh, sorry, it says practice coach, not Carter. Thank you, Bryony. I do apologise. It was
Yeah, I don't know why
it was the
it says
slide that was
Carter there.
confusing me.
Yeah.
Thank you. I remember reading it through. Thank you.
Okay. So hi, my name's Ollie Collins, and I'm from the Combined Labs.
And I'm Charlotte Meredith. I'm service improvement lead from the labs, and I've been coaching Ollie through the project. So I will hand over to him to talk through the slides.
So my practice coach project has been the index or centrifuge and span fence rollout into primary care. So as you can see, our challenge was to increase index or sample throughput by 10% by December 2024. Just for a bit of background, Indexor is a system that lets us process samples much quicker in the labs. You can see it at the bottom of the screen there with the computer screen. Centrifuges allow us to spin samples and increase their stability. Spun fences are bits of equipment that you will see a bit later that allow us to put centrifuge samples through the indexer. So our main goals through this were to achieve greater sample governance through using indexer, reduce sample loss in transit through using indexer, decrease turnaround times for sample processing, and a reduction in single-use plastic. So in terms of meeting those goals, sample governance, we've managed to achieve over 500,000 samples a year going through Indexer. Indexer provides us with an audit trail that provides time, temperature, and G-force monitoring, all of which is available from the point of entry at primary care centres to receipt in the lab. Decreased turnaround times, Indexer is super fast. It lets us book in 360 samples in less than 50 seconds, operated by only one person in the lab. To give you an idea of roughly what that means to us, if we were to use one index or system to process 60 samples, it would take about 4 minutes to fully process it. So from point of entry to removal to getting it ready to be tested, as opposed to 7 minutes and 8 seconds for one person not using Indexer. So a big saving there. Reduced specimen loss, we're talking qualitatively, but we've seen a reported decrease of phone calls regarding missing samples from the primary care centres. And just generally speaking, increased Indexor usage means secure transport for samples because samples are transported in a rack, in a box, in a bag, in a van. So we've got more steps for security in there. And reduce single-use plastic. Currently, we're looking at about a 52 kilogram reduction in single-use plastic from specimen bags that come in, which is roughly the same, my favorite statistic, as a giant African tortoise. So we've done really well there. Just generally looking at our data here. So as you can see by the purple line, the purple bars on the chart, we're seeing a steady increase through samples coming in through Indexer. The blue line represents the number of sites with Indexer. So as one goes up, the other goes up as expected, but we're happy with that progress as a result. In terms of our overall challenge, so far this year, we have seen a 9.9% increase in specimen throughput, as opposed to this time last year. For samples going through Indexer, we're very close to that target. We're very happy with that outcome so far. 77% of sites with Indexer is an amazing number, and we've got more sites lined up. So we're very happy with that. Just to give you an idea of what things were like in the lab before. So we had loads of samples coming in, not through Indexer. Everything was quite chaotic in terms of how we were dealing with everything. Whereas now we have everything coming in racks. I say everything, not quite everything, but we have everything coming in racks. As you can see in that lone picture there, we've got an example of a spun fence in the red rack. That's how we can differentiate between our spun and unspun samples. They all come in through our main Indexor station attached to that monitor there. Everything is much quicker, tidier, much more efficient way of working. So in terms of how Practice Coach has helped me, a lot of the tools that a lot of the tools that I learned from Practice Coach training, I tried to use doing this. So sat down and did a process map with people in the lab, used it to compare paper requests and electronic requests, particularly highlighting the complexity of paper requesting both in primary care and how we deal with them in the labs. Whereas electronic requests reduce steps for both sides and actually share the steps out between the labs and the primary care, so it makes it a much more workable system. We did SIPOC for paper requests, which highlighted the length of the process in total, and we managed to identify waste in terms of time spent on the individual parts of the process. There were parts that took a long time in terms of individually processing each request. We also did waste walk again for the paper requests, and we were able to identify greatest waste in defects and over processing, particularly human error when manually processing, transcribing, understanding what was written down in front of us, and repeated steps in terms of the number of checks that had to be done throughout the process on a paper form. So that is the Indexor project.
I do just have a few questions for you. So no doubt that this project has had such a positive impact on the lab and you and your colleagues. First one, which tool that you've used has helped you the most with this project in terms of Practice Coach?
I'd say the process map was probably actually the most helpful, just in terms of being able to process map how we did the electronic requests and the paper forms, use that as a point of comparison to see the number of steps that could be saved, how long things took to actually do things in the lab, kind of estimate how long it took in primary care as well. It definitely made a big difference in terms of how we were viewing the project.
Yeah. Amazing, thank you. And last one is, you're so close to that 10% improvement. I mean, you're basically there, aren't you? It's 9.9%.
Yeah.
What is your plan? What's on your radar to get you over that line?
So we've just got this last big push that we're trying to do in terms of phase 2 of our Indexor project. We've always said phase 2 we would try and achieve to complete by March, April 2025. So as part of that, what we want to do is we want to get our last Indexor units out. We have 5-6 Indexor units waiting to go. We're in conversation with Stoke Surgery, Portview, Efford, Southway. We've got sites that are interested and ready to go. So as soon as we can get them in, we're over that threshold. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. We'll stop the recording there, but thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Just while that ends, I just want to say really well done, because to Ollie, especially Charlotte, who's in the audience and has just made a comment about, isn't it awful when you listen to yourself back? And I know I sound very Jannerish when I come back, so that's just me. But really well done, Charlotte. Charlotte, thank you for doing the video, because it's really helpful. You had some really great questions. Is there any reflection you've got in coaching somebody on Practice Coach?
For me, it's been really interesting because I started this role about a year ago. So when Kerry coached me, Kerry knows this to beginning. Sometimes I thought, why is it being done this way? So to have Kerry really consistently do that, to me has helped me obviously do that to Ollie. And over time, it's really nice to watch him be like, I see why we do it this way, which I've had happen to myself as well. So yeah, it's been a honour to coach Ollie through this.
So well done, the pair of you, and also Kerry.
Yeah,
I got
thank you, Kerry.
one last question, which is, and how is Indexer going now? Is it still making the impact you want it to?
Yeah, it's a hugely successful project. He's very, very nearly over that 10% improvement. But other than just focusing on the numbers, made huge improvements to the lab and all the colleagues that use it.
Yeah, of course. And just for everybody in the organisation, obviously getting tests through quicker and accurately and not lost is really important to everybody. So really well done. I think it's a great improvement and
Thank
a
you.
very deserved practice coach. I think the certificate comes up next, does it, Bryony? Oh yeah, so the certificate on its way to Ollie is all signed. So really well done. I can't see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone's got any, please please put them there. We'll get them answered later. Let's move on. So thank you, well done. Oh, so Sarah, you're next.
Lovely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. So I'm going to talk about my kata project that I've done with Neil as my coach, which was implementing the SAFE score on the stroke pathway. Could I have the next slide, please? So the background, just before I talk about what SAFE is, just to explain who I am and the team that I work in, I'm a physio and I'm also the physio team lead on the stroke rehab unit. And the stroke rehab unit, although it's part of UHP, is actually based out at Mount Gold. So we're a little bit unique in that. So a lot of the work I had to do was actually crossing between working here with the stroke rehab unit and the acute stroke unit at Derriford. So the SAFE itself is a prognostic indicator to help predict how much an arm will recover post-stroke. So you measure within the first few days post-stroke, and it gives you an indication of how much recovery there would be at 3 to 6 months down the line. It stands for shoulder abduction, which is raising the arm out to the side, and finger extension, which is straightening your fingers. And it gives a score out of 10, with 0 being basically no power in the limb at all, and 10 being normal power. And has certain cutoffs. So, for example, if someone scores 5 or above in the early days, they're more likely to have good recovery in the upper limb. There have been a couple of studies, quite large studies done looking at the use of SAFE in stroke rehab, and has found that using the SAFE can help therapists, so physios and occupational therapists, with making patient goals, which makes sense because if you know likely recovery, it's easier to make goals. And then also in making treatment programs, so intervention programs, and also it has been found to slightly reduce length of stay, and that is believed to be because therapists have more confidence in when they've kind of done everything they need to do for that patient, and so they find it easier to say that's kind of finished now. The SAFE is recommended for use in the 2023 National Stroke Guidelines, so we should be trying to implement it. But at the time when I started the kata with Neil, which was in May this year, it wasn't being used at all, as far as I'm aware, on ASU or, sorry, the acute stroke unit or the stroke rehab unit. And in fact, most staff that I spoke to didn't know what it was. And the graph that I have shown there was before I started any of the stages of the kata. I just did a very quick survey of the physios, the occupational therapists on acute stroke unit and the stroke rehab unit, just asking them how confident they feel with predicting upper limb outcome. And as you can see, most were moderate, so not terrible. Some didn't feel at all confident, and a couple felt very confident. So that's where we started. I think I'm ready for the next slide now, please. So I just wanted to pull out kind of why I feel that Kata made a bit of a difference to how I approach things. So that's why I've sort of put this slide in. One of the big challenges for me was working, I say, across the two units. When I first wanted to implement SAFE, I was thinking of it from a stroke rehab point of view, but then when I looked into the evidence, the SAFE score needs to be done between day 3 and day 9. So it was quite clear that it had to be done at the acute stroke unit. So I was going to be asking them to do more, basically. And then we would be able to use the data to be able to then do our goals and our treatment plans. So, and probably prior to doing the kata, when I'd realized that, I probably would have thought, okay, that's, you know, that's outside of my sort of scope here. That isn't really my role. But working it through the coaching, kind of enabled me, and I felt like it sort of almost gave me the permission really to push a bit further. So I worked with the team leads on the ASU team, and we arranged a plan really. So I did a few visits over there. One was to give some training to them about what it was all about and how it would help the patients when they come to us. And then I went again a few weeks later because I realized that they were all very on board, but it wasn't happening. And they really wanted to do it, but they needed something to remind them because it wasn't part of their normal practice. So I got permission from them to add it as a prompt onto their therapy whiteboard that they use, to remind them. And then they just tick it off when they've done it. So that got them doing it. And then I was checking the notes, so I basically did a notes audit and still found that it wasn't being done. So I went back to them again, and they were adamant they were doing it, and it turned out that it was just being recorded in a different place to what I was expecting. So I think previously, with all those sort of hurdles, I would have possibly thought, oh, it's not going to happen. But it kind of, knowing that I was feeding back to Neil, kind of made me kind of go that extra bit, I think, just to try and work out what was going on. So in the end, it became practice, normal practice. So they had their prompt on the whiteboard, which meant they did it. And then we have put a prompt on our assessment form, which means we copy over the score to our assessment form, and then we use that to help with our predictions. Next slide, please. So what the outcomes were, so I did the training, and then they started using the SAFE, and then I asked the staff again how confident they now feel with predicting upper limb outcome. And as you can see from the graph at the bottom, it has shifted up. So we now have the majority of people in very confident, and we had one person who felt completely, which was really nice. My challenge that I set myself was for 75% of patients to have a safe score between day 3 and day 9. Ideally, you have two, one at day 3 and one at day 9, but I wanted to be realistic, so we went with one. And I did audit the notes over 2 months from when we had agreed where it was going to be recorded, and actually 80% of patients had a safe score, which I'm really happy with. And I've just done a check this morning over patients that were admitted over this past week, and 3 out of the 4 that have been admitted in the past week have had a safe score. So that's 75%. So we're maintaining it, so that's good. And I've started to hear staff talk a bit more about upper limb predictions amongst them. So obviously it's starting to become a little bit more normal practice. And overall, I went through 8 different target conditions, most of them working with ASU as previously described, but also some work with this team. So yeah, I think that's my outcomes really. Next slide, please. So just again, reflecting back on the process, I've said already, it felt like it gave me permission and made me a bit braver to do things I might not have done. I liked the step-by-step process. I liked the fact that when something wasn't working, the question from Neil was always, well, why is it not working? And the answer was normally, I don't know. And then it was like, well, how do we find out? And I liked that way of working and in sort of investigating. And I think it was really apparent that working across the 2 units and having a project that we were working on together was really nice, and it's made me think it'd be really good to have more projects like that we can join up on. And I think final slide, please. So I've achieved for the moment what I wanted to achieve, which was the SAFE being completed and staff feeling confident with the predictions. Ongoing things to work on. Obviously there'll be turnovers of staff. We have rotational staff that rotate every 6 months. So it's going to form part of our regular training program for staff. And what I've also realised is although people now feel confident with predicting upper limb outcome, having confidence to have that conversation with patients or their relatives, especially if it's not good news, is another matter entirely. So I've spoken to our clinical psychologist who's going to start doing regular having difficult conversation sessions with our staff to try and build confidence with doing that. And then I'm hopeful that then we'll start using the predictions with our patients to help guide goals and treatment plans. I want to get some feedback from patients, obviously, about whether they feel they've been told about their upper limb prognosis. Do they want to be told? How would they like to be told? All that kind of stuff. And then basically SAFE is quite a crude measure. It's if someone scores really highly, great, you know they're going to do really well. If they score really low, it's quite likely they're not going to do very well. But the in-between bit is quite crude, so it doesn't necessarily help us very much. In order to do that, we'd have to go the next level, which is called the PrEP2, but that involves using transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is quite, that's beyond my abilities to introduce to that, but it's something that I've just been reaching out through the physiotherapy networks as to are there any other teams using it at the moment, and how is that working, and something that I've been talking to my manager Craig about as well. So I think that is everything. Thank you.
Well done, Sarah. By the way, it was a great presentation. I love your subtle Christmas tree on all the slides as well. That's really fab. Um, you've got some nice comments, and I'm gonna ask one of the questions, but I might explain the question a bit just for the audience.
Yeah.
My question though first was, what difference do you think this has made to patients?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, Neil told me to put that in the slides. And I didn't. And the reason is because at the moment, I'm not sure it has made a huge difference to patients, if I'm honest. I think the next stages are the bits that are gonna to make the difference. This was really implementing the first bit. It was getting the SAFE
Okay,
being
great.
used. Yeah, and then hopefully the next stage will be, right, how do we now use that data to help us improve it for patients, which will be better goals and more focused treatments.
Yeah, so it's okay to do those things. So really well done. There was quite a technical question from Vicky,
Oh,
but I
was
just
there?
want to, yeah. So she's on the ball with Kata, so she's right in there. So she's asked, and I'll just explain for the audience. We use a phrase with Kata called threshold of knowledge, which is that key learning point that you didn't know before. Did you encounter several of your or explore some thresholds of knowledge as you went through the Kata?
I think so, yes. Whether this is the sort of thing you're thinking, but certainly, I don't know if this is a threshold of knowledge, but it just really became clear to me how important it is to delve deeper and to ask why something's not going right, rather than I think I had become possibly a little bit cynical, if I'm honest, of like you try and change something and it either works for
Yeah,
a little bit and then it
yeah.
doesn't, or it's really hard to get people changed. And I think I probably had become a bit too cynical. And so being asked to look into why is something not working and then try and just bit by bit work through each little obstacle is something I've learned. So I don't know if that is what you mean, but
It is one of them, so well done. So can I just say, and I'm not trying to get you hung up, I think it's a brilliant topic. You presented it really well. You've got a nice big thank you there from Craig Tucker as well. So I hope that's gone down well. And by the way, the way you've personally reflected on not just around the topic, but how it makes you feel and relationships in teams, I think is really nice and really insightful, by the way.
thank you.
Because obviously some of these tools use well help culture. So really, really well done. So I think what there should be next is a certificate on the end on the next slide. Oh, there you go.
Lovely.
The presentation works. So that will be winging its way to you. So I'm going to say really well done. And then also really well done to your coach. And obviously
Yeah,
you probably had some of Craig's support in there, but really well done to
yeah,
Neil as well. So
definitely.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So well done. I think next up it is Chris Mildren talking about the training and the impact.
Yes, yeah. Hi there. Yeah, a quick update from me. If we can move to the next slide, please. So before I go into the bullet points, really, just a huge thanks on behalf of D&I of the amount of kind of input and time we've had from the Quality Academy, particularly Neil and Kate for the training, and everybody else who's involved, including getting us running round, which I'll mention in a moment. But yes, what we were able to get from the Quality Academy, we managed to train approximately 50 of our service managers, our team managers. So it's over about 90% of success rate in terms of the people we took on, and those were across 3 cohorts in October, November, December. Timed just when we had the ask of the leadership training as well. So for the teams to find time for that was like a huge thanks from my colleagues to do that. And this is all to really introduce us and get us up to speed with the people first practice routines training and how we can start using it in our service. I have to say the uptake was fantastic and the engagement from the teams was really good, and the training was genuinely really well received, and it was actually quite a useful side benefit to actually get a lot of our managers and team leaders to share the same space where we may work independently and start sharing some of those common issues and themes. And possibly unsurprisingly to some of you, one of those real headlines was about how many meetings we have. And a little bit of like, okay, well, what can we control? You know, we can control our own destinies to some degree, but what can we actually get some senior focus to actually give us focus on the important stuff, the running of our service and the implementing of our of those improvements within the service as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we've achieved so far, so what's going to be really exciting is what we're going to be able to really do with this knowledge and this training in the new year. But already with the support of you guys in the Quality Academy is we've done it's really supported our what we call SMIT, great acronym, but it's our service management and improvement team. So these are our service managers that report into our heads of department. The group itself's been running for a couple of years and it's looking to be more effective, really. So with the Quality Academy's support and this people first practice routines, we're already starting to introduce some new standard work, actually structuring our agendas in a way that's going to be most useful and beneficial. We've introduced team health. We did the first one yesterday, which was looking at respect. That was one of the team values that the SMIT team collectively agreed on. And literally 5 to 6 minutes, but already there was some praise to share with the team, but also a really quick and easy consideration of how we can support onboarding new members to the SMIT group as and when they join. So we're really keen now and we've got that agreement. We'll embed that going forward. In terms of data, we are not short of data. What we were short of was actually effective data. So actually using some of these principles to start managing by exception so that we can have more meaningful conversations within those management groups. And that's been a real positive outcome. It's also we're embedding some of our improvement work. So we already had a service improvement, a service strategy, I should say, with some improvement pillars. Potentially happening a little bit siloed, not deliberately, but then this is now actually bringing those improvements holistically together. And it's actually helping this SMIT group, the service management and improvement team, put the I back into that SMIT, the improvement focus. Like I say, I'm looking very positive feel of how that can kind of really evolve next over the coming year. We've got some early adopters within the teams. So we have a few teams already running their huddles. Service desk in particularly, they're one team who are always permanently on site. But also our digital transformation team, the team who support the rollout of new systems and new processes, they're getting a huddle together. Similar with our business services, our business administration team, they're running the huddles. And Bush Park already working towards building up a daily plan control process. So there's already some benefits that we're seeing. But already what's really positive in terms of the next steps is some teams have either got things planned or are coming to me or others saying, right, we're really keen to start taking some of this practice. How can we use this? So we've mentioned about the heads of department standard works and routines. So we're really going to be embedding that. We've got some areas that want to use the daily plan control. They may adapt it to a weekly plan control, depending on the kind of requirements of their team. But so from an operational point of view, how are we standing? What's our staffing? What's our performance last week? What are we expecting in terms of demand next week? Teams really interested in looking at 6S, for example, our deployment team, huge amount of equipment coming in, set up and being delivered out into the organization. And other teams are also interested in using team health in addition to our SMIT group, actually as a real way of bonding the team and then using that as a groundwork then to start introducing huddles in their areas. And then what's going to be really exciting is about, from my perspective, is how I can then be supporting others to introduce improvements. So I may have improvement manager in my title, but this is actually really enabling all of our teams to start embedding that good practice within their teams. So yeah, looking forward to seeing my colleagues do some great things in the new year. And once again, just a huge thank from the to the Quality Academy for giving us that time and resource.
Thank you, Chris. Really well done. I don't know if there's any questions about to pop in. I'm just going to pop a little thing about leadership fundamentals if anyone wants access to it. It's really nice some of the comments you made about already in practice in lots of areas. I don't think I've got a follow-up question because the presentation was great, by the way.
Thank you.
But obviously you've got ongoing support if you need it. I wonder if there's any questions from anybody in the audience. No, but really well done, really great presentation. So thank you very much. On the money. I think is there a follow-up slide? Ask it, Bryony.
I think that should be it. Oh, sorry for you.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I don't know why we seem to have managed the Grinch this year rather than Elf for somebody else, but I don't know why. Coming up next, which is now in the end of January, I hope we've got something. Key Lamb is doing something on CSS. Kate Gardner on criteria discharge. I think our Tidy at Work REI. There will be an update from the admin program. Hopefully, Chris, you're going to come back and do some more D&I, how you're applying it, I think, and there's some paediatric improvement work. So a lot more to come in the new year, and I think there's a few bits of detailed reporting on the sprint work to come through as well. So it's probably going to be a really bumper one. So really look forward to that. I just want to thank everybody for being part of these calls. I think we try and keep them nice and positive. And I really appreciated the tone today and reflective. So well done, everybody. Thanks for attending. And I think you've just all got 15 minutes back. So thank you very much for all the work over the year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.